Yesterday, Bethesda revealed that Starfield is about to get a new update, at least for some of you. They tweeted, "We've been hard at work on Starfield updates and we'll be putting our next one into Steam beta next week. This update will feature NVIDIA DLSS support with frame generation, display, and HDR controls for supported systems and other optimizations and improvements." And they followed this up a bit later with another tweet saying, "Note, DLSS is for PC NVIDIA users only. We'll also have AMD FSR3 support in a future update." And this all is actually pretty big for a few reasons, the biggest of which you may have not even realized. Firstly, these new features are just massive. DLSS 3.0, aka frame generation, specifically can yield a 30 FPS bump in Starfield, at least based off the modern implementation, which many have been playing with for a while already. And if anything, hopefully the Bethesda official edition will even get you more than 30 FPS. So now many will actually be able to get above 60 FPS in many of the major cities in Starfield, but only some of you. Because to use DLSS 3.0, aka frame generation, you'll need to be on PC and be using a 4000 series NVIDIA GPU. Regular DLSS 2.0, which is available for the rest of the NVIDIA GPUs, likely won't lead to a huge change in performance, although visuals may be a bit better compared to FSR2. And really, what I think is the far more exciting news to take away from all of this is that FSR3 support is coming and seemingly being worked on. FSR3 is usable by NVIDIA GPUs that are newer than the 2000 series, but also AMD GPUs. And FSR3 has shown to have some massive boosts in FPS, and it could potentially even come to consoles at some point. Unfortunately, we don't actually know when this will be coming to Starfield, but as of right now, FSR3 is released in a couple of games. It's having a very slow rollout, so we may not even see it come to Starfield until 2024, but I feel like that's going to really be the big performance boost many are hoping for. And in general, it's just nice to see that with this next update, Bethesda is seemingly adding a nice chunk of these planned features into the game finally. This update is launching in a bit of a different way though. It'll initially be a beta release on Steam, so you basically have to opt in for the update to download, and Bethesda will collect user feedback and probably make some revisions with that. So on one hand, this is a great way to avoid broken updates, basically public testing before the full update launch, as well as more of a heads up before breaking everybody's mods. And personally, I hope they keep doing this. It's unfortunate it's limited to just Steam, but very few games take advantage of this feature and it can be incredibly handy. But despite the fact that many viewed this added degree of communication around the update as a good thing, there are definitely some fans out there where this post made them more concerned for the future of Starfield. This because Starfield was on a pretty consistent update schedule up until last week. We were getting updates for the game every 2 weeks, but this time around, the timing's going to be a bit longer, as here instead of 2 weeks, we're seeing a 4-week gap in between updates, and specifically this is going into beta testing after 4 weeks. So it may still be a full 5 or 6 weeks in between updates before this next one releases for everyone. So of course, developers taking their time to fix things is definitely not a bad thing, but the rate of change for Starfield has definitely been somewhat slow. From the first 3 patches to release for Starfield, we only got 19 changes or bug fixes, that over a roughly 6-week long period. And then now, after waiting another month, we're finally getting a new update, but only in beta testing and adding in features that modders brought in months ago. And the reason this has led to some larger concerns is there very much so are things that urgently need to be fixed with Starfield. Specifically around quests, there are several quests as a part of main faction quest lines that are currently broken, so you just can't complete them, which effectively locks you out of completing the entire faction quest line, which is pretty huge. On nearly every post you could find talking about a Starfield update, you'll find numerous responses of people complaining about not being able to complete the Ryujin quest line or the Freestar quest line, and that's really only referencing some of the main or larger quests. There's also a bunch of one-off side quests that are also broken in Starfield right now. And again, this becomes a much larger issue because one locked quest blocks progress for the entire quest line. So there are huge chunks of the game that players are being locked out of. But I think we are getting a bit of an insight into how frequently we could expect these updates to come. Starfield may only be getting 2 more larger updates this year, and this DLSS update is likely to be one of them. And as people are waiting, fan frustration has definitely been mounting. The Starfield subreddit has pretty much just turned overtly negative about the game. Many of the top posts voice frustrations with the game, and I think what is far more telling are the Steam reviews. About 50% of the recent Steam reviews for Starfield are negative, so half the people leaving reviews aren't saying good things. And in the past 2 weeks, Starfield has received more negative reviews than positive ones, so things are trending downward heavily. Many of these reviews citing some of these game-limiting bugs, but of course many other things, several of which are design design decisions. But on this one, I'd honestly love to hear from you. Let me know in the comments down below. Are you content with Starfield's update schedule, or do you find these larger gaps to be frustrating? I feel like you could really view it from both sides. If you are somebody who can't play the game completely because of a bug, then yeah, waiting a month for an update finally to come out is incredibly frustrating. But at the same time, Bethesda has definitely had problems with releasing updates and then finding bugs in those updates after the fact. So if the longer schedule is allowing for more testing and less bugs, then it's hard to fault them. But I would say regardless, Bethesda definitely needs a bit of a course correction with Starfield. If you look at these reviews and really just overall player sentiment, things are definitely shifting. But seemingly a DLC or even mods could be a big turnaround, although based off the slow rate of updates and bug fixes, many have concluded that DLCs or even official mod support are likely a ways out and definitely not an early 2024 edition like many were hoping for. Although we may have just gotten a look into what is going to be one of Starfield's DLCs with star stations. In the files of the game, many of the parts for working star station outposts were there. It's described by the mod author how a lot of the star station functionality was already working in the game with just a couple of broken aspects that he resolved at least somewhat. So now you can download the star stations for outpost mods to place down this giant tower at your outpost and build your very own star station that will spawn above your outpost. You'll be able to fly up into space and see it, as well as go into the star station itself. This is an absolutely insane mod. It definitely has some limitations though, but it definitely feels like we're getting a look into either a major piece of content or what I think is actually going to end up being one of the planned DLCs for the game. Creating options in space would fit in super naturally for Starfield, and you have to imagine there are several Outpost DLCs planned, just like what they did for Fallout 4. Although if you are one of the people that are having some issues with Starfield, specifically around its design, we got a pretty interesting insight into the development from Bruce Nesmith. They were a senior systems designer on Starfield and at Bethesda Game Studios for years, even being the lead designer on Skyrim. Bruce left Bethesda in 2021 after working on Starfield for years, but they just had an incredible interview with MinMax where they describe how he himself said the game would be better if they just focused on 24 systems instead of the hundreds we got. But Bruce describes how during development it seems like that shift to having many systems was largely thanks to procedural generation. It was described to him that once you do one solar system with procedural generation helping you, it's really not that much harder to do 100. The procedural generation tech will just take care of most of it. Reportedly through development, there was a working number of 100 systems planned for Starfield, and the reasoning for this was, with past Bethesda games, people really loved the open areas to explore and big games in general. So with Starfield, they said, let's let them have that, and that's why we got so many systems. Bruce describes that he thinks some of the exploration stuff on some of these planets didn't land, and that's likely because they had to make other choices on where to spend resources, like on building your own ship, as opposed to devoting all of that manpower towards making exploration better. Which honestly makes a ton of sense. Shipbuilding in Starfield is awesome, while exploration definitely leaves a lot to be desired. Maybe early on they kind of just realized that. Exploration was never going to be a huge selling point, but if you look around now, there are tons of pictures of crazy ship designs dominating social media and definitely getting people excited about the game. Like I mentioned before, Bruce left Bethesda in 2021 and he described how the stability and performance on release from Starfield really surprised him. But overall, I found these specific insights to be very interesting because it frames how Bethesda got exploration so wrong. I think most fans would agree that the almost aimless exploration is one of the biggest issues with Starfield. It just is not that fun to fly on different planets, and very quickly you're going to hit repeated content and quite a few load screens, which is quite a contrast to what was otherwise one of the most fun parts of past games. But I can see it from Bethesda's perspective. On paper, having a vast universe of explorable planets with points of interest does really sound epic. I can definitely see how from Bethesda's perspective during design, they thought this would be really fun. And I would even argue in Starfield that it does take quite a few hours for the exploration to become notably less fun. It's almost like there's this cumulative stacking effect of the load screens and constantly being a bit disappointed in what you find that makes it feel worse. Overall, this full interview with Bruce was phenomenal. He goes over a ton more with Bethesda, and I'll have a full link to it down below if you're interested. But speaking of info, we do have the other things coming from Bethesda. Over a year ago now, the Fallout 4 Next Gen update was announced with a release window of 2023. We just have a couple of months left in the year, and we haven't heard any further updates on this patch. But with Fallout 4's 8th anniversary coming next week, that seems like a prime window for either an announcement or maybe even a surprise release. Which, yeah, make note of that. If Bethesda is about to do a surprise update for Fallout 4, make sure you back up your mods and try and disable auto updates because things will almost certainly break on the mod mod side, and Skyrim paid mods are likely to be dropping later this month as well. With that said, if you're looking to get the unofficial update to Starfield, check out this video to see how modders are fixing the game themselves.